As my guest on the final At Home With program, I'm very honored, humbled, and a whole variety of words similar to be in the presence of one of the great musicologists of the 20th century, and a man who's also been a conductor, composer, pianist, and he's done everything. Nicolas Slonimsky, thank you so much for allowing us to come and talk to you.
Well, if I have done everything, then I suppose I would be subject to a criminal penalty.
Indeed.
Because this is sort of too encompassing.
I see. I was intending to mean everything musical.
Oh, everything musical.
But I guess that could cover some criminal things too.
Yes. Oh, yes. Some kind of music can be a crime, particularly if it's accompanied by some avant-garde actions such as mutilation.
Yes.
There was a composition performed in Italy which actually involved castration.
Interesting.
Yes, if I can say such a word on the air.
How long ago was that?
About 5 years ago. And
did the performer survive?
Well, the performer survived, but his wife divorced him.
If I could ask you this, your career has been so long and varied. Can you remember what your earliest impression was of classical music?
My earliest impression of classical music was that it was out of tune.
I see.
Because when I was very little, and at first I began to realize that there was the world of sounds, which to me was just as immediately perceptible as the world of words. And I realized that classical music didn't sound like an ordinary folk song and had too many notes in it. And so I was very much disturbed why there were such contradictions in classical music. But my aunt was a very famous piano teacher. Her name was Isabel Vengerova. She eventually came to America and taught at the Curtis Institute of Music. Among her students were Leonard Bernstein and Samuel Barber and other celebrities. Well, she taught me music ever since I remember myself. And then when I was 6 years old, my mother told me that I was a genius. And that was a great mistake, because I knew that geniuses usually commanded respect and acceptance and money. So I was growing and growing and growing, and the world was still not at my feet. So I had to stage a nervous breakdown at the age of 7.5 to wait for the world to come to worship me. Well, I think your laughter is very inconsiderate, because after all, I was suffering at the age of 7.5.
I see. You've been known for many years as a champion of contemporary music, and I know that you conducted the premieres of many works of Varese and Ives. Why did you feel the need to do that? Was it because there was not very many people bringing those works to light?
Well, that was one reason, but the main reason was to explore new frontiers of music. You see, I was brought up in Russia, and my musical concepts were formed entirely under the influence of Russian folk melodies and the great works of Russian music, which I heard around, and my aunt played them on the piano, and I learned some simple Russian songs first when I was very young. But then when I came to this country, I realized that there was a new world And it so happened that I met Henry Cowell and Edgar Varese and Charles Ives and Carl Ruggles and Wallingford Rieger and several composers from Mexico and Cuba and Brazil. And I was struck by another way of treating music. It was just like learning a new language. And our contacts were almost natural. At that time, I was just starting on my conducting career, and I had nothing to show. I had no name. I had no orchestra. That was 50 years ago. And then I realized that I could do something that other conductors either couldn't or wouldn't do. Mainly master those extremely complex rhythms and hear what was going on. And I remember that when I met Ives for the first time, and that was fully 50 years ago, and he showed me his score, 3 places in New England, I somehow intuitively realized that I was gazing at a work of genius. And it never happened to me in my life except with that particular score. Nobody would touch it because it was extremely difficult. There was one movement which involved manipulating 2 different march rhythms at once. And then I developed a system of conducting which is ambidextral. That is, I conducted one rhythm with my right hand and another rhythm with my left hand. Someone said that my conducting was evangelical because my right hand knew not what my left hand was doing.